in case anyone wanted to pray with it afterwards. So as you can imagine, this type of prayer, as we journey with Jesus through his passion, invites us to engage our imagination. And St. Ignatius, the patron saint of our tradition for retreats, says that God uses gospel stories and things like the Stations of the Cross to imaginatively draw us into their world so that God might reveal God's self to us. So as we pray these stations this morning, we're going to be invited to use our imagination. This is really the primary faculty that we engage in this prayer. And as a way to help us do that, at the beginning of each station, Ellen, Sarah, and Joan will read a short reflection. And again, it'll be from the perspective of Mary as she accompanies her son in his passion. And I would invite you maybe just to close your eyes and listen deeply to the words read, Mary's words read. And as we move through the stations, new slides will appear for each station. And on each slide, representative of that station will be an image, as well as some of the words that you will hear from Mary. And we'll spend about 90 seconds of silence between readings so that you'll have a time to, again, enter imaginatively into the experience of Jesus and Mary as we move together through this way of sorrows. And at the end of our 8 stations, there'll be a 9th slide. And on that slide, we'll take a couple more minutes to review the experience and try to see how God may have revealed God's self to us during the course of our prayer. It'll be a short reflection with a couple of questions for review. After we conclude our stations, which will take about 25 minutes, we'll have a little time for some faith sharing, and then we'll conclude with one more prayer experience before our chapel ends. So let me invite you now before, or as a way to sort of prepare for our prayer, to find a posture that will allow you to certainly be comfortable, but remain alert during this experience. You might take a few full breaths, just allowing yourself with each breath to let go of whatever you might be holding from the morning. Relax into our time together. Allow yourself to be present to the 40 or so people who you are praying with, and certainly to what God has in store for you through this prayer. And in the silence of your own heart, I invite you just to ask the Spirit to open your mind and open your heart, that you might imaginatively enter into this way of sorrows with Jesus and Mary. And that God might reveal to you how God is with us in our own suffering. And with that, friends, let us begin.
The first station. Jesus is condemned to die. My son stood before Pilate as an innocent man, but Pilate washed his hands while Jesus' hands remained tied behind his back. Throughout his life, he entered more and more deeply into our human condition. It was not enough. that he was born of a human mother like me. He grew up in obscurity in Nazareth, and they always judged him there, being conceived before Joseph and I were married. Even when he began his public ministry, the religious leaders didn't accept him. His reflection of God didn't fit their self-serving picture of God. Finally, his own followers abandoned him. I never imagined he would have to experience solidarity with prisoners beaten and tortured, but he did. Jesus began his journey by becoming one with every powerless person, mocked and made fun of by others. He did nothing that deserves capital punishment or the abuse he was given. His yes, his surrender to God's will, ultimately destroyed the power of sin and death. While he was growing up, I told him many times how I had been graced to say, "Let it be done to me according to your word." I never could have imagined that this would be the sword that would ultimately pass through my heart. To watch my son say yes to God so completely and fully for the salvation of the world. Now that he is condemned to death, reflect with me on each station of his journey, entering more and more completely into our humanity and death itself. Let us ask for God's grace to be with him and to accompany him on his journey to more fully understand it and to be more fully grateful for its gift.
The second station, Jesus carries his cross. My son was forced to carry the cross on which he would be nailed, ridiculed, and executed. We must pause here to remember what it represents. For this journey, he takes up the weight of all of our crosses, all of our senseless suffering, and the weight of sin, of all the sin of the world, past, present, and future. He walks in the path of human misery and suffering and experiences its crushing weight. We can contemplate the wood of that cross. Imagine how heavy it is. Reflect upon all it means that Jesus is carrying it. Each of us can say, it was for me. Place yourself with him in this journey, in its anguish, in his freedom and surrender, in the love that fills his heart. As we imagine each step he takes, we can pause to say, thank you, in our own words, deep in our heart.
I can barely express to you what it was like to see my son fall under the weight of that cross. Everything within me wanted to make them stop. This was already too much. But there was nothing I could do but watch him lay on the ground. Of course, I know now that if he was to enter completely into our lives, he would have to surrender to the crushing weight of the burdens so many in the world suffer. All the people of the earth who are overcome by unfair burdens will always know that laying there on the ground, Jesus knew and would always understand their powerlessness. Unable to get himself up, he entered into and forever understands our fatigue and whatever unfairly defeats us. This is for us. In grief and gratitude, we can remain present as he lays powerless under the burden he carries. My son simply wants us to remember how he loved then and loves us now.
As I pushed and shoved to move through the crowds, to be as close to my son as I could, we came to a place in the road where he stopped. He saw me, and we looked into each other's eyes. I didn't want him to see my tears or know my pain, but I long ago accepted how thoroughly he knew me. The love from my heart poured out in the only embrace I could give him. My lips quietly said the prayer he taught us. Abba, may your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I then let my smile bless his mission, and our trust in God keep us bound together. Thank him with me, even now, that he took up that mission for us. Thank him that he has tasted the separation and loss that every person in the world knows who has lost a loved one. And he has understood the heart of every loving mother who grieves at the suffering of her child. He has become so completely one with us.
I can't describe his face, with the blood and the sweat and the bruises and swelling from the beatings. As a mother, I can hardly tell that there was even spit on his face. It was the face of solidarity with all who have ever experienced abuse and violence. Then out of the crowd came a woman whose compassion for my son was so great that she pushed past the soldiers and wiped his face with her veil. Oh, how I loved her for that. The look between them touched me deeply. His face, his clean face, for a moment, revealed the loving face of the son I loved. Can you imagine looking into his face? What do you see? After my son left the woman, there on her veil was a stunning likeness, a true icon of the cost of his sacrifice and the depth of his solidarity with all who suffer. This image is the gift of himself given to each one of us.
When my son fell the second time, my heart sank as he seemed to just lose control and stumble and crumble to the ground. The way he fell to his knees on the hard stones, I could feel the jarring pain through my whole body. Helpless to help him, I again wondered if he could make it. As I look back with you today, I imagine that this fall placed him together with people with disabilities, with people suffering from all kinds of physical diseases that weaken them, and with all who are aging and must confront the limits of their bodies. My prayer is that you store this image in your heart, knowing that you are never alone in your suffering or any diminishment. With gratitude, we take time to find the words to express our feelings to him.
Today, as I remember him lying on the cross with his arms outstretched, it is the sound of the hammer hitting the nails that stays with me. I remember pulling the first of many wood splinters from his fingers as a child. Against his precious hands and wrists that touched and healed so many, a nail was placed, and a hammer pounded the nail through his flesh and into the wood of the cross. This sound, metal against metal, that ring, and the look on his face, the spasm of his whole body, I will never forget. Then the other hand, and finally his feet are nailed to the cross. As the cross is lifted up, the weight of his life hung on those nails. Every time he struggled to pull himself up to breathe, his ability to cling to life slipped away. This is for you. Nailed to a cross to forever proclaim liberty to the captives. Speak to him about your sorrow or gratitude.
No mother should ever have to bury a child. And the huge stone they rolled over his tomb was the final sign of the permanence of death. In his final act of surrender, who would have imagined his tomb would soon be empty, or that Jesus would show himself alive to his disciples, or that they would recognize him in the breaking of the bread? As we picture this scene, let us place the image of the empty tomb before our eyes. Whenever you are tempted to stand outside any tomb and grieve, remember this empty tomb and know that through the eyes of faith, all tombs are empty. In the fullness of faith in the risen one, express your gratitude for the way of the cross. Ask Jesus, whose hands, feet, and sides still bear the signs of this journey, to grant you the grace needed to take up your cross and be a servant of the risen one's mission.
In the final minutes, friends, of our prayer, I invite you to go back through your experience with the questions. What was affirming, surprising, and or challenging as you journeyed through Jesus' passion with Mary? And how is journeying with Jesus and Mary speaking to your own Good Friday experience this morning? Friends, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Okay, friends, we will bring of the cross to a close with one more image, and that is of Michelangelo's Pieta. If you ever noticed his Pieta closely, you'll know that he, in his creative brilliance, he sculpts Mary, the figure of Mary, much larger than that of the figure of Jesus, almost inviting us to recognize and realize that God's love is very much like a mother, in that her love is unbreakably untethered to the heart of her child. Her love suffers right along with her child, as her one desire is to comfort the pain of her child. So as we prepare to contemplate this image of God's love, and I'd invite you to return to yourself. Close your eyes, recenter yourself using your breath. Taking a full few breaths. And on your in-breath, you might again imagine that you're breathing in the love of God, the love of a mother whose love is unbreakably tethered to your own heart. Breathe in that love and allow it to fill every bit of your body, every cell. And as you breathe out, you can imagine that you're giving yourself back to the mother in trust, giving yourself back in love to the love that is always giving itself to you. And sit for a moment or two in the reciprocity of this love that sustains you. piece of music and this image continue to take us deeper into the heart of God's love.
You will come and share my sorrow, hold my heart till wake tomorrow. Is there time that I could the silence and the sorrow. When I was young, I dreamed of roads not taken, to walk the way so long and forsaken, and I would seek the heart of consolation. It was found in you. You will come and save my soul. Hold my heart till wake tomorrow. Is there time that I could walk? The silence and the soul. When love was young, I cried with tears of laughter, and deep inside, I wondered what came after. How a heart could love without condition. It was found in you. Who will come, share my soul, with my heart. Is there time that I could when life was young and living seemed forever, I knew somehow you never hid its pleasure.